let's now do part 2 of the 1000 miles championship in race 1 here at Nürburgring Nordschleife. The first of 4 races that we are doing in this championship, and from what I can see, it looks like the Nürburgring is probably going to be one of the longest in terms of just time and distance. With these 73 corners and bends, we are very much on our way to proving that we are the king of the ring in our Jag. And it looks like we have basically got no one to contest us. Which again is a little bit disappointing, but I'm honestly not surprised, because I figured the default opponents for this event were probably going to be easy to beat either way. Unless I was up against the Mercedes 300 SL, which probably would have been my only real competition for this. I still think I would have won this race by a long way because of my superior car speed. And that's ironically what has helped me to build myself up to such a big lead at this point. Basically a 1 lap plus lead at this point. So I think by the time we're done here, I will probably be 2 laps ahead of my nearest opponent. So up to this point of the race, I have put the Fiat 500 precisely 3 laps down. Then I think next up is the Volkswagen Carmen Gear, who I think is now less than 2 laps down. The Honda S800 is 1 lap down. And then ahead of those two we have the Mini Marcos, which is also 1 lap down. And then at the front of the field, aside from me, there is the Alfa Romeo GTA... No wait. The Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA that is at the front of the field and is also 1 lap down, as that graphic confirms. I am very much seizing the day with my Black Cat Jag. And I say that appropriately because a Jaguar technically is a wildcat. Although technically if you are looking for black wildcats, then you would technically be looking for a panther. And I don't mean the pink panther, I just mean a panther. I'm also pretty sure there is actually a film series that goes by the name of Pink Panther, even though I'm pretty sure that is most likely a detective thriller film series that was popular in the 60s and 70s. I'm also pretty sure David Niven was the main star in the Pink Panther movies. It's not really relatable, it's just me basically referencing a well-known panther. I suppose you could also include the NFL's Carolina Panthers. They are pretty well known. And I think aside from that, there is also the... oh yeah, of course, there's also Black Panther in the Marvel universe as well. I am pretty much just giving you examples of what I know have panthers in them. Oh yeah, there's also those old Pink Panther wafers that they used to sell. I'm not sure if they still do those anymore, but I definitely remember having those Pink Panther wafers. This is kind of me just going completely off topic, as we're now 2 hours into our first race. And I think we've probably got another, at least, I would say, another hour and probably 40 minutes to go for the rest of this one. So point is, we still have a long way to go in this race, but at least we are past the halfway point. It may suck with the amount of times that I have significant lap drop off on the 5th lap of every stint I do, but I am pretty convinced in saying I can make these 5 lap stints work, as long as the understeer from the tyre wear does not give me too many problems. As I am now going to put the Fiat 500, I think is now going to be 4 laps down if I'm not mistaken. And yep. So the Fiat 500 is now 4 laps down, if I recall correctly. I am trying to keep myself monitored with how many times I overlap the AI. Or at least I am trying my best to keep up with them as much as I can. So, yeah. Had to lift off the throttle there, or else I would have spun and hit the grass. Obviously, don't want to do that. And we are now almost 180 miles into this. And no change on the mileage yet. And now we are at 180 miles. I'm pretty sure that's the way they say 180 in darts. I have watched enough darts in my lifetime to know when they say that. Oh, and I'm cutting the corner. Well, to be fair, I did have no tread on my front tyres. It's probably a bad idea for me to keep it going on this stint, because of how worn down my front tyres already are. It's really going to make turning into some of these corners a bitch, because I have no tread left on these front tyres. I might also be cutting corners either on purpose or by accident, just so my car manages to somehow stay on the road. I will try and keep it on the road as much as I can, but again, because I have no grip left, it's probably not surprising to see me cutting a few corners, just so my ride is able to stay on track. And now the Fiat 500 pits in. I think he went 11 laps, if I'm not mistaken, on that stint. I'm pretty sure he's definitely 4 laps down at this point, because of how slow he is. And yep, my front tyres are basically beached. So I think if I am going to get to the end of this stint, I may need to cut some corners. I will try my best to keep it on the road as much as I can, but at this point, it's hard to say for sure if I can really keep this car on track, because of the fact that my front tyres are basically fucked, and the fact that my corner entry speeds at this point are going to be garbage. So I think at this point I am probably going to cut a few corners just so I can get to the end of the stint. It's not what I would normally do, but at this point my front tyres are practically so worn at this point that I can hardly even keep my car on track long enough to really make some of these turns. It's just not possible with the way that my car is currently running. I probably should have put on weight reduction, so then tyre wear wouldn't be as much of a problem, but I figured because my car was nimble enough to get me through each of these races, that's partly why I chose to do this the way I did. So I think after this I might actually switch my stints over to 4 laps, because, well, my tyres were practically so worn on the fronts. Okay, let me rephrase that. Basically, my front tyres were practically so worn at the end of the previous lap that I practically did need to pit. So I think from here, it's probably going to be 4 lap stints instead of 5 lap stints. I know it's a very sudden change, but when it comes to endurance racing, you kind of do have to swap and change your strategy, especially if weather does play a part in the enduro events. You basically have to be ready for it when it happens. I know the time of day doesn't really change in these earlier games, and it's not really until GT5 when we get to see a change in time variance, as well as also the inclusion of weather, both of which will play a part in GT5. But you can still basically run racing softs in the wet in GT5, and yet your car will technically still be quick, in spite of you not running wets. I don't know what the idea of the glitch is, but I definitely know that is a useful glitch that probably will help you out. And also the fact that when it comes to tyre wear, the racing soft tyres in GT5, they do not wear as much as some people think they might. They actually have similar tyre wear to what the mediums and hards technically do. And I can tell my car is understeering as I go through these corners. As I said before, my front tyres basically are dead, and I think at this point of the race it's really not worth it to keep struggling on the tyres now. I am well over a lap ahead of everyone else now, and it looks like at this point we are very likely to put ourselves in just the position we need to be in to basically run 4 lap stints from here onwards. And yes, that does mean by the time we get to lap 19, that will basically be when I stop in for my second and last fuel stop. Because for 6 laps, I know the amount of fuel I need is not going to be too much to get to the end. And once again, my front tyres are basically dead. So at this point, I really do need to change my strategy as soon as I am done with this stint. Also, we've now driven less than 200 miles, and I think by the time we get to the end of the next lap, that is when we will be at the 200 mile mark. Something that I just noticed on my mileage board thing. So I think this is where we are going to change our stint, because if we don't, then, well, my tyres, they will basically just feel like shit to drive on for the rest of this race. Which, by the way, is what I don't want. And in the wall, however, I can at least say the sport suspension is helping me to get through these corners better than I would be had I not fitted the sport suspension. It does give me slightly better corner entries, even when my car does understeer the way it does. But at this time, I'm just trying to make sure that I hold on as much as I can, as I run a little bit wide there, but we now have only 10 laps to go after this one, as we are through Sector 10 once again, and it looks as though we are very much out front with no challenges. So this is where I'm going to switch from 5 lap stints to 4 lap stints, because at this point I kind of need to do that, or else my car is just going to be basically, or else, as I said before, my car is just going to be shit to drive every 5 laps or so. Don't need to refuel yet, just need another set of slicks, and then I will do 2 more 4 lap stints, and then afterwards we can just focus on getting to the end of this race with just a little bit more fuel, and then we should be fine. So we're now going to switch from 5 lap stints to 4 lap stints from here on, because I think my tyre wear has gotten slightly worse as I went through that previous stint. It might also be because of my overusage of the curbs, that might also be contributing to the tyre wear. But at this point, I can pretty much afford to do what I like. It might be overusage of the curbs that have been causing me to get more tyre wear, but At this point, I kind of knew the tyre wear... Sorry. I kind of knew the tyre wear was going to get worse as we went further and further through the race. And I think at this point... it's pretty obvious to say that we basically need to do something in order to make sure that we get our pace back on track. So 4 lap stints from here is basically going to be the approach I take, and cutting the corner on cold tyres. Thankfully, however, I did avoid going into that gravel trap, otherwise it would have been oblivion. I also know that if we were driving around here in the 60s no less, then I'm pretty sure most of these corners would practically be death traps. Although these corners technically still are death traps in some cases. It's just that, well, they used to be a lot more dangerous than what they are now. Because I'm pretty sure in the 60s, there probably were guardrails around the place, but they didn't exactly fit it with any Armco barriers. They were basically just protective fences around the place, and probably also bits of barbed wire surrounding the track and the trees back then. It still technically is one of the most dangerous tracks in the world. I would honestly argue that Nürburgring technically has claimed more lives than I would honestly argue Indianapolis has. And a lot of people actually did used to call Indianapolis Motor Speedway the killer track because of its infamous reputation at the time of many drivers losing their lives around that place. And the same can also be said with the Nürburgring as well, because, well, people are technically still dying here virtually every year. In some cases you honestly could argue that this place is quite similar to the Isle of Man when it comes to people getting either injured or killed here every year. This place is not for the faint-hearted, and I am also glad to say that a lot of the racing they used to do around here, I am glad to say most of that has been called off. Because I think these days, I'm actually glad to say that they're only racing GT3 cars around here these days. Because I think racing any other car around here, unless you're just wanting to set a hot lap or something, it's really not in the best of interests to set your lap around here, unless you are a consummate professional who has practically had so much time in the simulator that you basically know every single detail there is to know about Nürburgring before you drive around it. I figured I would just say that because, well, these things might be important to know. So, at this stage, we are very much in a class of our own. And the only thing that we're really doing is just turning laps, like we were before. And for this part of the video, I am already 25 minutes in to this part of the video. I knew this was going to be a long race, but as to how long it ultimately takes, I would say it's probably going to be at least another hour and 20 minutes, the way things are looking right now, because while we are technically still moseying our way around the ring pretty well, there are still plenty more opportunities for me to have one huge accident. One that I don't think I've had up to this point. I've had a few scrapes with the wall up to this point, but that's only natural around this place. But I don't think I've really had any major accidents at this point, which up to this point surprises me, because I was expecting myself to have at least one instance where I basically have wrecked my car hard. Although it might also be because we're not at the endurance phase of the game yet. That might also be the reason why I have not crashed enough around this place yet. That could probably be a valid reason, from what I can see. And so we are heading towards the end of the 1.2 mile straight once again. Basically the backstretch. And I think I'm coming up to overlap the VW again, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, I am. As he will now go 2 laps down at this point of the race. So that will be the second opponent that I will respectively put 2 laps down. And there we go. The Volkswagen Carmen Gear is now 2 laps down. And we still have another 8 laps to go after this one. As we are pretty much well over 200 miles into this event now. I know for sure that we will have probably driven more than 300 miles by the time we get to the end of this one. So don't be surprised if we pass the 300 mile mark before this is all said and done. Because it is going to happen. I think it's just a simple matter of when it happens. Or we're going to be near enough to the 300 mile mark. Because we are basically driving nearly 13 miles per lap. So technically what that would mean is... let me think. So... yeah, so 13 times 5, that would technically be 65. And 65 times by 5, that would be... 195, 200, 260... yeah. We would technically have less than... if my maths is correct, we would technically have less than 325 miles in this race under our belt, so technically speaking we would have definitely driven somewhere over 300 miles in this race, give or take the mileage that we do. It's somewhere along those lines for sure. But anyway, I am continuing to pretty much glide around this place and set pretty much unmatchable benchmarks at this point. And it looks as though we have basically got this one by the horns. I am pretty much guaranteed to win if we keep running as we are, and providing nothing goes wrong from here, but I think because I haven't used my PS2 for a day or so now, I would say we're going to be fine. Because I can definitely say that the PlayStation 2 is made to be durable for just these types of events. And at this point... oh, I got distracted. Yep. Well, that's my first off of part 2 in this race. And we're now past half an hour in terms of our driving on this part of the video. And as I said before, this will certainly be the second longest championship of the game in terms of miles driven. Because, well, we will also have the Formula GT World Championship to do at some point. And that, I can assure you, will be at least twice as long as this one, from what I can see. And not just in terms of the races we have to do, but also in terms of just about everything else. I can also assure you that the Formula GT will be way faster than my Jag. Even though one thing about the Formula GT that I never really have been a fan of in the first two games to feature them, basically GT3 and GT4, is the fact that while they're technically special cars, you cannot fit or buy anything on the cars, and that also includes tyres as well, to realistically give the Formula GT the extra tyres it might need. And maybe there is a reason behind that, but I don't know what it is. So personally, I never really have been a fan in the earlier games of just not being able to fit tyres to the Formula GT cars. That you get in both GT3 and GT4. And I think it might also be because, well, Polyphony Digital technically did license the Formula GT cars, but I still don't think it's any reason behind why no tuning is allowed, not even for tyres. I mean, I can understand why everything else wouldn't need any tuning, but I still think, under the circumstances, that if you're wanting to be all-inclusive, then you would at least expect there to be tuning of some sort for every car in terms of upgrades. Hell, even if it's only tyre upgrades, I would definitely appreciate that a bit more. But I think it might also be because the Formula GT practically is one of the rarest cars in the game, so that might also be the reason why they don't exactly allow tuning of any sort on the Formula GT. I don't think many of you will really be watching this race up to this point, but if you are, then, well, feel free to give me your answers in the comment section about the Formula GT and why they cannot allow any upgrades whatsoever, or any tyre upgrades, to say the least. If you have any answers, then I would appreciate it, but I think most of you probably won't be watching this video up to this point. You'll probably just skip to the end. And in some cases I probably wouldn't blame you, but either way, I am here, and it looks like it's going to be at least another hour before this well and truly gets done. I should probably stop running my car in the grass so much with these tyres. That would probably be helpful at this point. Just so I can continue to set those good consistent lap times. So, we are 17 laps into race 1 of the 1000 miles championship. And then once we're done here, I can basically call it a day because, well, I do not have enough energy or time to really do 2 races in one day. And now I am going to put the Fiat 500, I think this is now the 5th time I've overlapped the Fiat, so he now goes 5 laps down. I am trying to keep up with the ticker of how many times I have overlapped my slowest car up to this point, and I'm pretty sure that is now the 5th time I have overlapped the Fiat. It's easier to keep up with when you know there's less laps on the board, so that's partly how I know it's now the 5th time I've overlapped the Fiat 500. I think is basically just a field filler at this point. Which under the circumstances is understandable. And I have not had any problems clearing him. Because our cars are pretty nimble. Still, I don't think I could ever see myself owning a Jaguar, let alone an E-Type, because a lot of them are just so rare nowadays. It would almost be impossible to contemplate that sort of thing. But at this stage of the race, I'm basically just turning laps and making sure that I get to the end of this. So Yeah. Also, in terms of the king of the Nürburgring in the pre-war era, I believe his name was Rudolf Caracciolo. He was technically the king of the Nürburgring at that time. Prior to Stefan Beloff, who technically set the lap record around the Nürburgring in a Porsche 962. Rudolf Caracciolo technically did have the most wins around Nürburgring Nordschleife with 5. And I have got to say, he was actually a really good driver in the pre-war era. This of course was, well, prior to the start of World War II, but either way, Rudolf Caracciolo was a really good driver. And I think he was mainly known for driving the likes of Auto Unions, which by the way is the name that Audi had prior to it becoming Audi. He also drove Alfa Romeos and Mercedes, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, he was a really good driver, and he did also win here 5 times. Prior to World War II, which is very impressive for any Grand Prix driver to achieve, especially at that time. Although a lot of people know the pre-war Grand Prix master as technically being the Italian Tazio Nuvolari, who basically was, in some cases you could argue, the Max Verstappen of his day, because of just how good he was as a driver. And I can certainly say in the post-war years that there were plenty of races that took place here at the Nürburgring. And I think it was up until either the late 70s or early 80s when a lot of the major racing series were still racing around the Nordschleife, but I think after that point, however, I think it was around, I would say 1984, when F1 returned to the Nürburgring after that ill-fated 1976 race, where Niki Lauda nearly lost his life. It was 8 years after that, before F1 returned to the Nürburgring, and they basically did so for the revamped Grand Prix circuit. When F1 returned there for the European Grand Prix in 1984. I don't know who the first winner of that race was, but I think it was Alain Prost who won the first return race to the Nürburgring on most parts of the GP circuits that we technically see today. Although the Nürburgring GP circuit since then has seen a few modifications itself. And I think it's been running with its current layout now since 2000. Of course, the driver with the most wins on the GP circuit that I can think of would probably have to be Michael Schumacher, because he won on the GP circuit layout 6 times. No, correction. He won there 5 times. Because there was one time where F1 basically used to go to Germany twice a year, and nowadays it doesn't go to Germany at all for some reason. It might just be because, well, Germany doesn't really have the money to host Grand Prix events anymore. That probably is the main reason. Although, I can definitely say it was a pity when they left Hockenheimring after the rain-soaked 2019 race, which a lot of people often do say was a bitter but fair way to end off the German Grand Prix stint. Although, I certainly wouldn't be against the idea of F1 returning to Germany, because they actually have more influence in Germany than you think they do. And that's not just because of Mercedes. But it's also because, well, under the circumstances, Nico Hülkenberg himself is German. I think there will be a point where sooner or later F1 will return to Germany, but I'm not going to say when for sure because, well, I don't exactly have any connections to people within the FIA, nor do I have any connections to people at Liberty Media who can really tell me that. Still, it would be nice to just, well, to just come back to Germany in whatever capacity possible. Personally, I would like to see F1 come back to the Nürburgring GP circuit, but I think if they're going to return anywhere, then in my opinion, it would probably be at Hockenheimring. Because, well, Hockenheimring technically has been the venue for the German Grand Prix for so many years. Basically since, I would argue, 1977, when it first showed up on the calendar for obvious reasons. Hockenheimring was faster, but it did also prove to be safer, because it had more up-to-date... because it did have more up-to-date layout modifications, and also safety features in place, compared to what the Nürburgring had before. I mean, the Nürburgring did have Armco barriers, but aside from that and maybe 1 or 2 tyre barriers somewhere, I don't know where precisely, there wasn't really much else in terms of safety features. Aside from the protective fencing for spectators, of course, but aside from that, well, that was about it. And yep, I definitely need to pit on this lap because my front tyres are basically giving way. And it probably shouldn't surprise me either at this point. But I've still got tread, and tread is just the thing I need. So, heading through the carousel once again. And and it looks like at this point we are very much going to make our next stop. And then after that, we will run for another 4 laps on our next stint, and then for our final stint, we will basically be doing 2 laps on the softs, just to see if we can manage to potentially go purple again in the sector splits. That's basically what my plan is for the rest of this race. I may not have much tread left in the fronts, but I do think at this point I do at least have enough tread to get to the pits. Although my rear tyres aren't as worn, my front tyres at this point are basically shredded again. And that normally is what happens when you race around a place as bumpy as this one. You often do expect there to be heavy loads in the tyres. And since you can't really adjust air pressures in this game, when you go off on worn tyres, you're basically just along for the ride and trying to make sure that you keep your car off the Armcos if you can help it. And thankfully, however, for most of this race, I have managed to do just that. I figured it wasn't going to be a perfect run, but what I also figured was, at this stage of the race, I knew the tyres were probably going to be wearing out quicker than they were before. So this is the lap where I will pit, and then once we are done with this, we will have just 1 pit stop to go. So we've got less than an hour, I would anticipate, in this, the second half of this race, and it looks like at this point we are keeping ourselves very much at the front of the field. And hard on the brakes, and holding on to my car as much as I can, and through the pits. And yes, I will refuel. So we've got 1 more pit stop to go after this one. I think that should be enough. I think that should be enough milliliters of fuel from what I can see. It's nearly a full tank, but we should have more than enough gas now to get us to... But I think we should have more than enough gas now to get to the end of race 1. So we don't need to pit in for fuel again, but we will of course pit in for tyres. And just because we'll only have 2 laps to go by the time we get to the end of our next stint, we can basically fit the sport softs, because I think 2 laps will be enough. for me to hold on and potentially take away my previous fastest lap, and then probably go a few seconds faster. I could probably also do that on the mediums if I really wanted to, but at this point I'm basically just making sure that my car continues to stick, and got a little bit of a wobble there. However, I do manage to correct my steering for a second there. I am at least able to say the sports suspension does give me a better shot of actually saving my car compared to before. Which in all honesty is one thing that I really wasn't expecting from this. But either way, here we are. So, 19 laps are down, and we still have another 6 laps to go before we are at the end of this race, if you include this one. And at this point, I would say we are very much just doing what we normally do, which is continually pulling away from our opponents and just, well, staying uncontested. And that's a wall. I think I will actually start pushing a bit more with my car now. Maybe try and see if I can eke out a few tenths compared to the laps I have run before at this point. Because for most of this race, it's mostly been about tyre management. And I don't think it's really any surprise to say. And I don't think it's really any surprise to say at this point that we've had little to no action for these last 10 laps. The field has very much been spread out, and that's basically the way it's going to be for pretty much all of the endurance events, because endurance events in this game are just so easy to pull off when you have the most durable tyres. So, it looks like at this point we have got this race pretty much all but secured. As long as nothing goes wrong from here, we should be on our way to scoring our first of hopefully 4 wins in this 4-race championship. Because personally, I really want to get the clean sweep here, with just how long these races are. And considering the outright speed of my Jag, I would say that's going to be easy enough, because we're just so far out ahead of everyone else. It's almost unbelievable with just how far out ahead we really are of everyone else. So the Fiat 500 is now 5 laps down. The Volkswagen Karmann Ghia I think is now either 2 or 3 laps down. Although I think if I'm not mistaken he is 2 laps down now. The leading Alfa Romeo is still 1 lap down, with the Mini Marcos also 1 lap down, and I think the Honda S800 is still 1 lap down as well, as I can see the sun peeking through the clouds. Although I would imagine that's probably been there for most of this race. But at least I can say it's not blocking my view like it does in Monaco in GT3. I mean, the sun is practically so low at Monaco in GT3 that the amount of glare you basically get from the sun at Monaco in GT3, it basically is enough to distract you, because the sun is literally that low. When you basically head up the hill past Saint-Devote and then go through La Massenais, I think it is. At least I think that's the corner. And the Mini Marcos is now in the pits again. So... oh wait, I think I just remembered I did actually put the Honda 1 lap down. Unless he is just behind the Mini. Sorry, the Marcos. I don't know why I said Mini. But anyway. So I am now going to put the Mini Marcos 2 laps down. And I have not overlapped anyone in the pits. So it looks like my next opponent to be overlapped will be the Mini Marcos. And yes it is, as I will now put him 2 laps down. And it took me 20 completed laps to get here. So there we go. The Mini Marcos is now 2 laps down. And it looks as though at this point, like, the results are pretty much all but assured. So at this point of the race, the Fiat 500 is now, I think, 6 laps down. The Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, I think, is 4 laps down. Sorry, wait. I suddenly don't remember how many laps I am ahead of everyone. Okay, let me think. Right, okay. I think I know this now. So I am precisely 6 laps ahead of the Fiat 500, although that will almost certainly be 7, considering my overall pace at this point of the event. The Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, I think, will be 5 laps down. Then it will be the Honda S800 that will ultimately be two laps down. Then it will be the Mini Marcos that I just overlapped. He will also be 2 laps down. And the Alfa Romeo, by the time we get to the end of this, he's still 1 lap down at the moment, but it's only a matter of time before he does go 2 laps down. Because my pace is just that much better than everyone else's. I would have really liked a challenge from this, but sadly I don't think we're gonna get one of those. So, we are continuing to close in on the Alfa Romeo that is just up ahead of us. So I think he will go 2 laps down before too long. I think if I recall correctly, the Honda S800 was already 2 laps down up to this point, so I think the Honda will go 3 laps down by the time we're finished here. And then it will be up to that point when I will have put everyone in the field essentially 2 laps down. So this is the Honda up ahead. I think he's currently running in 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. Or 4th, I should say. So I think that now puts him 3 laps down. And the Fiat 500, I'm now coming through to overlap for either the 5th or 6th time in this race. Possibly even 7th time. You see, because these races go on for extended periods and there aren't any tickers to know for sure about how many laps ahead I really am of everyone, it's kind of hard to determine how far ahead I really am. I think I've now put the Fiat 500 7 laps down at this point of the race, and I don't think that's going to be the last time I overlap him. So up to this point of the race, the Fiat 500 is now 7 laps down. I think the Volkswagen Carmen Gear, if I'm not mistaken, I think is now 4 laps down. The Honda S800 is 3 laps down, and the Mini Marcos, as you saw earlier on, he is now 2 laps down, and the Alfa Romeo that is leading this race is still currently 1 lap down, but I would imagine he will probably go 2 laps down by the time this race is over. Because my car is just that much faster than everyone else's. Oh god. Okay. Well, it was coming eventually. It was probably a matter of time before I had a head-on impact with the wall. I figured I was not going to get away with this without at least one nose-first impact into the wall. It was probably coming either way. Honestly, wouldn't have mattered whichever way I did it. And my car right now is dirty. And it will probably stay that way for most of this championship until I get it cleaned up. Although then again, these are basically endurance events, so I'm probably not too surprised. But in terms of the amount of mileage I can get out of these cars in this game, the amount of mileage I get before the oil line turns red is, I think, 3,000 miles before the oil line indicator, or before the oil filter indicator turns red. You can actually go 3,000 miles in a single event before that happens. Although thankfully, however, I don't have to do that yet. So, we continue with our goal of pulling further ahead. So, we have 4 laps to go here at the Nürburgring, and at this point of the event, whatever positions we finish in, we are probably going to stay in those finishing positions, because everyone is just so far out ahead of everyone else. Well, everyone except for the Fiat, of course, because, well, the Fiat is basically in no man's land in terms of pace, which in a way kind of sucks, but in another way, he's basically just here to fill out the running order, if that makes any sense. In other words, he's basically a field filler, like I said before. I think that might be a hairpin that we go through with that gravel trap on the outside. At least I think that's a hairpin. But anyway. So the Honda S800 is now in the pits. I don't think anyone else is going to reach the end of this race before me. It honestly would be helpful if there was a lap ticker in this game, because then I would be able to work out just how many laps down everyone else is compared to me. But unfortunately the scoreboard doesn't really stick around long enough for me to actually see anybody else finish. Plus, you know, because we're at the Nürburgring, it would be almost impossible for anyone else in a race like this to really get to the finish as soon as I get to the finish. Unless they finish before me and time expires. Something that I have established is very possible when it comes to endurance events, as we are now 3 hours into this race. And in the second part of this video, I am well over an hour into it. So here we are. It looks like I will overlap the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA 1600 on this lap. I am steadily closing in on him, And it looks as though I'm now about to put him 2 laps down. As my car's engine very much becomes the driving force. And I basically just need to do nothing but drive, basically. And in the slipstream of the Alpha temporarily, but I have now put him 2 laps down. And so, me winning this race now, it's pretty much all but secured. I now have a 2-lap lead over the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint. And that's now pretty much the whole field, 1 lap down. Sorry, the whole field 2 laps down. My mistake. But anyway. Got 2 laps to go after this one. And I can certainly say that I cannot wait to see the checkered flag at this point. Because, well, I have been going at this now for at least 3 hours now up to this point. But I should be able to get there, because that's what I often do. So, yeah. Oh, and I downshifted a little too soon there. But I think that's okay, because I did manage to keep my car on the road. I am honestly glad to say that the fuel tank can actually go a long way in this event, because up to this point I have only pitted for fuel twice. And it seems almost genuinely obvious that my car really does have probably some of the best fuel mileage, because I can manage to probably go for 10 full laps on one tank, which is pretty impressive. But anyway, so got 1 lap to go on this stint, and then once we are done with this stint, we can switch over to the grippier rubber, just to end this off and see if we can improve on our previous best lap time. So, through the final corner, and I am 3 seconds off on that last lap. Hopefully, if it's possible for the rest of this, the soft tyres will hang on for the last 2 laps around here, as I am now an hour and 20 minutes into race 1. I am so glad that I did manage to get the Nürburgring over and done with today, because I don't think I would have given myself a better time during this week to actually get this one going. And that's what I wanted to do. And I did just that. So I think this is now what? Yeah, this is now stint 5 of this race, and as I would have guessed, my front tyres are close to being shredded again. So I think up to this point, we really need to make our last stop for tyres. My fuel stop is pretty much complete at this point. Fuel is not going to be a problem for these last 2 laps. It's only the tyres that I really need to think about. Although because of the tyre wear here, it is making me a little bit reluctant to try using the softs. But I guess because we only have 2 laps to go, hopefully the tyres will not be chewed up too quickly. I am prepared to take a gamble and see if it works, but as ever, I can never afford to be hesitant. As I have now been recording this part of the video for less than an hour and a half. And if you thought this was one of the longest races in this game, then I highly suggest you think again. Because the real longest races of this game are much longer than this. Much longer. But anyway, that's just how we're doing at the moment. We're just continually pulling away, as we always do. And we are closing in on the 300-mile mark. I think we'll probably pass that on the very next lap. So at this point, I would say we're pretty good in terms of our overall lap pace. Oh shit. Oh yeah, I'm sliding. Okay. That pretty much tells me these tyres are worn. I'm still wondering if I should go with the soft tyres, or if they'll just give me the same issues that the hard tyres are giving me, except for saying that it'll be in less time. Although, I wouldn't think my soft tyres will be shredded in the course of just 2 laps. As long as I can be conservative on the first lap without using too much tyre wear, I think I should be okay. And I'm not making this corner. Yeah. My left front tyre was practically shredded to the point where I just wasn't even going to bother making the corner, because it just wouldn't have been worth it. Sure, I wouldn't be allowed to do this in real life, but since this is in a video game with no penalty systems for corner cutting, at this point of the game, I would say we are very much right where we need to be. Okay. Come on. Let's go. Okay, still making it through the corner. And so, all we have left... I was not making that corner either. But anyway. We are still keeping ourselves in the fight. Alright, so. Yep, my front tyres are shredded again. So I think that pretty much tells me I need to be conservative on the first lap if I am going to go with the softs for this final stint. And then, if I can be conservative enough on the first lap, then I should be able to go full send on the second lap. It'll probably require some short shifting, but at this point, I think we should be good. But I certainly cannot wait for this first race to be over, because of how long it's taken. So, almost 300 miles into the event, we are almost certainly going to pass that by the time we get to the end of the next lap, and that's a wall. And putting on the softs, no need for refueling, and we have got 2 laps to go in this race. And so here we go. And that's a wall. Don't want to touch that. And so we are now on a fresh set of boots. The soft tyres will warm up pretty quickly, but I am still going to have to be conservative on them. And that is by making sure that I keep my revs in the right place. And I have also heard that if you can technically use higher gears to realistically warm up your tyres, then you can actually conserve them by doing this. And short shifting, I think, also helps with that. And already my left side tyres are warming up as I short shift into 5th gear, just really trying to make sure that I get these tyres warmed up and ready for the final lap. Just basically playing conservative, as I am now going to be at the 300 mile mark any second now. And there it is. We are now 300 miles into this race. And hopefully at this point my tyres will not wear down too quickly. Which is kind of why I'm technically doing a slow outlap, because I want to try and see if I can get this gamble to pay off. Which is why I am doing a slow outlap, or slowish, I should say. So, you know. Alrighty. So, I think in terms of our tyre management, we are doing pretty well at the moment. And we'll see how we go. Maybe. There is a reason why I am going slow on this outlap. And there's also an even better reason as to why I am making sure that I manage my tyres pretty well. And so, looks as though I am coming to overlap the VW once again. I think he's now going to go, 5 laps down at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So, up to this point of the race, if I recall correctly, I'm now 7 laps ahead of the Fiat 500. Although that could potentially be 8, depending on where he is on the track. The VW Carmen gear is now 5 laps down, and the Honda S800, from what I can remember, is 3 laps down. The Mini Marcos is 2 laps down, and of course the ticker for the Alfa Romeo that you just saw there, he is also 2 laps down. Just really trying to see if I can manage my tyres as much as I can, because I do want to make sure that I have enough tread to get to the end of the second lap with a purple lap time. hopefully. So at this point, it would seem as though we are very much right where we need to be. I'm not wearing down the tyres too much. I'm also not going too hard in certain places. I am just making sure that my tyres are rubbered in, basically. And I think by the time we get to the end of this lap, we should have enough tread to potentially go for a purple lap time, since that is partly what I'm aiming for. I'm basically going conservative on this lap to then try and see if I can go balls out on the last lap, basically. In other words, I'm putting together one slow lap to try and see if I can put together one fast lap, basically. At least that is what I am trying to do. I should have enough tread in my tyres to go for it though. So once I get to the end of the straightaway, that is when I can start pushing, from what I can see. I think I should have enough tread in these tyres now to go balls out. So that's what I'm going to do. I've been playing it conservative for most of this lap now, and I think up to this point we should have enough tread to go balls to the wall. Or so I would hope. So just got one more lap to go. My top speed is still 156. I'm probably going to be at least 15 seconds off my best lap time, because I needed the tread to make sure I could go for it, and I think I can now go for it. So, final lap here at the Nürburgring. And I think I should have enough tread to get to the end of this lap. And a notification popped up on my TV. I could not do anything except pause the game for a moment there. The TV basically does do that after a while. After about 3 to 4 hours, it basically just sends me a notification saying it'll switch itself off in about 5 minutes. And to be fair, I have been at this for a while now, so I think at this point it's perfectly understandable. And the Fiat is now 8 laps down. So, ultimately, I think I did make a good choice by going for the soft tyres for this final stint. I really wanted to make sure that I had the pace, and I think I have done that pretty well. And through the through the second sector split, it's a 132. I think my previous best was a 134, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of my best sector split in Sector 2 up to this point of the race. So the Fiat is now 8 laps down, The Volkswagen Carmen gear I think is now 5 laps down. The Honda S800, from what I can recall, is 3 laps down. And then we have the Mini Marcos in second, 2 laps down. And then behind me is the Alfa Romeo, who is 2 laps down. So technically the Marcos and the Alfa are both running on the same lap. And I think at this point we should have everything we need. A little bit wide there, but I think we should be okay. And so we have just over half a lap to go now. As I had to clear my throat for a second there. And once we are done with this lap, we will be done with race 1. I think we should be at least 3 hours and 40 minutes by the time we're done with this. I'd say about 3 hours and 41 minutes is how long it's going to take for us to finish. But since I did conserve my tyres on that previous lap, because I kind of figured I had to, I'm now able to go balls to the wall for the rest of this lap. As I'm hitting 126, 127. And able to approach these corners with a bit more speed than I was before. This will almost certainly be a new personal best lap time, depending on how long I hold on for. And it looks like at this point we have basically got nothing to lose. A little bit too fast there for that corner entry, but thanks to the grippier tyres I was able to stay on the road, which by the way is a good thing. I've got the tyres, got the tread, and I've also very much got the guile I need to beat my previous best lap time. Which probably has to be at least 25 seconds up on the next fastest lap time from what I can see. And well, my left front is showing some wear, but I should be able to get to the end of this without too many problems. I'm definitely up on my sector splits compared to before, so I think at this point hopefully we should be good. And I go off into the gravel. Maybe going with the softs wasn't such a good idea. Maybe I should have stuck it out with the mediums. Although I still think my lap time will be fast enough to beat the best overall lap time, in spite of that one mistake. As long as I don't go off again, I should be fine for the rest of this, from what I can see. I do still have a pretty fast car anyway, so it's not like too much time is going to be lost at this point. Looks like it is going to be 3 hours and 41 minutes that it will take to finish this race. And I can certainly say this has been a long one. And this will be far from the last. So on the 1.2 mile backstretch for the final time. And yep, my front tyres are definitely worn now. I'm definitely not going for another lap on these tyres. Thankfully. Because otherwise at the end of the next lap my tyres would just be dead. And no one else is going to make it to the line before me. Probably understandable, as my new best sector split is a 7:56. My top speed in this race stays at 1:56. And it looks like I am going to improve on my best overall time by 2 seconds at the least. So 3 hours, 41 minutes, and 4 seconds is how long it took. Oh, the Honda S800 was 5th. Okay, well those are your points. So let's just summarise this for a moment. So those are your points after race 1. I forgot the replay BGM was on. I really hope YouTube didn't catch that. I should probably turn that off. Anyway, that is race 1 of the 1000 miles championship now done. So I won in the end by 2 laps over the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA 1600. Then in third it was the Mini Marcos, who also finished 2 laps behind me. Then we had the Volkswagen Carmen Gear, who I believe finished 4 laps down. Then it was the Honda S800 in 5th, who I am going to assume was probably 5 laps down, or 6. And then the Fiat 500 finished 8 laps down. So glad race 1 is over. And now I will save this replay, because that is how I get my thumbnail shots. I will have to make sure I turn off the replay music. Yeah, that'll work. That should do nicely. In terms of what my thumbnail shot will be. And that is now the end of race 1. And how are we going to save the championship, you may ask? Well, if you remember my GT World Championship video, you will know that I technically saved the game by doing this. So those are your points after race 1, and that's probably the way the other races will look. Anyway, if I go back to the main menu, you will notice that the game autosaves, because I put the autosave feature back on. And by autosaving this game, we will be able to continue the 1000 miles championship. So, that was race 1, and now we have 4 races to go, as next time we will be heading to Opera Paris. So stay tuned for that.